She went to visit her son's grave. What she found there changed everything. The November drizzle soaked the marble tombstones, but nothing could prepare Eleanor Whitmore, billionaire CEO of Whitmore Global, for what she saw at her son's grave that morning. A black waitress, young, trembling, and tear-streaked, stood silently with a small child beside the headstone of Eleanor's only son, Adam. The boy's green eyes stopped. Eleanor in her tracks. She had seen those eyes before, in the mirror, and in Adam's. "Who are you?" she asked sharply. "My name is Jasmine Carter." "And this is Tyler," the young woman said, voice steady with dignity. "I visit every month because Adam. He meant everything to us." Eleanor's world tilted. Adam had died 3 years ago. She had searched every detail of his life and found no serious partner, let alone a child. But as Jasmine confessed the truth, Tyler was Adam's son, and she had raised him alone. Eleanor's disbelief turned to fury. She offered Jasmine money for custody. Jasmine tore the check in half. "You're not buying him," she said. "He calls me Mom. I stayed when it mattered. That's family." But what Eleanor didn't realize was this meeting was only the beginning. Jasmine had spent 3 years preparing, documenting, studying, and building quiet alliances. She wasn't just a waitress. She was the keeper of a legacy Eleanor had buried, and a reckoning was coming. "You can't buy my son," the waitress who shattered a billionaire's illusion of power. When Eleanor Whitmore invited Jasmine Carter to the penthouse office of Whitmore Global, she believed this would be a formality, a signature, a check, a done deal. Instead, she walked into a confrontation that would shake the foundations of everything she thought money could control. The office was vast glass walls, skyline views, a desk that looked more like a throne. Eleanor sat tall, cold, calculating. Jasmine, wearing her only blazer thrifted but pressed, sat on a lower chair, deliberately placed beneath Eleanor's eyeline. But she didn't shrink. "Not this time. We need to talk about Tyler," Eleanor began, sliding a check across the desk. $200,000. "Take this. He comes to live with me. Private school, inheritance, every door opened. You may visit on weekends." Jasmine didn't flinch. She looked at the check, as though it were something poisonous. "I'm not selling my son," she said calmly. Eleanor's lips curled into a polite sneer. "He's my grandson. You can't offer him what I can." Jasmine took a breath, voice unwavering. "I've offered him what you never gave your own. Son presents, warm meals, bedtime stories, someone to hold when the nightmares come. That's what family is." That struck deep, and Eleanor, used to controlling boardrooms and bulldozing resistance, felt the sting of a truth she'd never dared face. She had missed her own son's life. The conversation turned vicious. Eleanor stood, looming. "Let me be clear. I will use every lawyer, every judge, every connection I have to prove you're unfit. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment, no college degree, 2 minimum wage jobs. I will take him from you." But Jasmine, who had once cried in silence at Adam's grave, smiled for the first time. It wasn't arrogance. It was calm assurance. A signal that this wasn't a fight. She entered unarmed. "Eleanor," she said, her tone almost gentle, "you've underestimated the wrong woman." Then she walked out, leaving the shredded check on the polished floor like snow. 3 days later, Eleanor's lawyer, Richard Thornton, called in a panic. "Jasmine has legal representation. Morrison, Calvel, and Pierce." Eleanor froze. That was one of the top civil rights law firms in the country, the kind that didn't take cases unless they knew they'd win. "They filed a motion," Richard continued. "Any attempt to remove Tyler would be considered discriminatory on abuse of power based on socioeconomic bias." Eleanor was stunned. How did a waitress get a top-tier legal team? She didn't know that Jasmine had spent 3 years preparing. Since the day Adam died, Jasmine had been documenting, studying, gathering support. Her allies included Dr. Michael Chen, a Columbia law professor, investigative journalist Amanda Torres, and her aunt Helen Washington, a retired corporate law expert. They had everything: financial misconduct, corporate fraud, bribery, and tax evasion. They had receipts. And if Eleanor pushed harder, Jasmine was ready to pull the trigger publicly. But it wasn't about revenge. Jasmine had made that clear. "This isn't about hurting you," she said in a phone call Eleanor hadn't expected. "This is about protecting what Adam asked me to protect, Tyler and the truth." What Eleanor never knew, until it was too late, was that Jessica, Tyler's birth mother, was her own niece, the daughter of Robert Whitmore, the cousin Eleanor betrayed decades ago to steal control of the family business. Jessica died during childbirth, and Adam, heartbroken, had confided everything to Jasmine. He had collected evidence, planning to confront his mother, but he died before he could act. Jasmine inherited it all, and now she had the law, the media, and the truth on her side. Eleanor's empire began to crumble. FBI raids, asset freezes, lawsuits, and headlines that shattered her reputation. But the final blow wasn't legal. It was personal. 2 years later, in an orange jumpsuit, Eleanor sat across from Jasmine in a prison visitation room. "I just wanted you to know," Jasmine said, placing photos on the table. "Tyler's been accepted into the same academy Adam went to. Full scholarship. He's learning violin. He's happy." Eleanor looked down, defeated, her empire gone, her family broken. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because he asked me if bad people can change," Jasmine replied softly. "And I told him, only if they want to." She left quietly, like a storm that had passed, leaving behind not ruin, but clarity. In the end, Jasmine didn't just win custody of Tyler. She restored a legacy. She rewrote a family history built on betrayal and replaced it with one rooted in dignity, love, and truth. And she did it not with rage, but with preparation, patience, and the unwavering belief that justice is worth the wait. She was just a waitress, until she brought down a billion-dollar empire. For 3 years, Jasmine Carter had worked in silence, serving coffee by day, cleaning tables by night, raising a child alone in a one-bedroom apartment. But behind that quiet life was a storm building, because she knew something no one else did. The empire Eleanor Whitmore built was a lie, and Jasmine had proof. It all started with Adam Whitmore, Eleanor's only son, and the father of Jasmine's child, Tyler. After Adam's death in a car accident, Eleanor believed her family legacy had died with him. What she didn't know was that Jasmine had been by Adam's side until the end. That Adam had entrusted Jasmine with a final mission: protect Tyler and uncover the truth. The truth about what Eleanor had done. Jessica Blackwell, Tyler's mother and Adam's love, wasn't just anyone. She was Eleanor's niece, the daughter of Robert Blackwell, the man Eleanor had betrayed years ago to steal control of the Whitmore empire. Eleanor's lies had driven Robert into poverty. Jessica grew up with nothing, while Eleanor built towers and private jets off stolen fortune. Jessica never told Adam who she really was, afraid Eleanor would cut her out too. But Adam found out, and he started gathering documents, recordings, legal contracts, proof that Eleanor's success had been built on fraud, bribery, tax evasion, and backroom deals. Before he could go public, he died, but not before leaving everything to Jasmine. And Jasmine never forgot. For 3 years, she prepared. She studied law in night school. She built a team: Dr. Michael Chen, law professor at Columbia; Amanda Torres, an investigative journalist with a nose for corporate corruption; and her aunt, Helen Washington, a retired attorney who had once stood against giants and won. They documented everything: fake shell companies, offshore accounts, illegal, political, donations, and labor violations. They connected the dots between boardroom greed, government silence. Jasmine's apartment may have been small, but it was a war room. Every file, every piece of evidence, meticulously cataloged. She wasn't just protecting her son. She was preparing to take down an empire. And Eleanor never saw it coming. When Eleanor tried to take Tyler from Jasmine, she thought it would be easy. A signature, a court order, a check. Instead, she triggered a legal firestorm. Jasmine's lawyers weren't public defenders. They were Morrison, Calvel, and Pierce, one of the top civil rights firms in the nation. They filed a motion. Any forced removal of Tyler would be considered socio-economic discrimination and an abuse of power. That was just the beginning. On Monday morning, headlines exploded. Whitmore empire built on fraud. FBI, IRS, investigate corporate giant. Images of Eleanor's headquarters being raided, files being confiscated, and employees escorted out filled every screen. Anonymous sources, Amanda's team leaked audio, recordings, and financial records. Eleanor's name was no longer synonymous with success. It was tied to corruption. But Jasmine wasn't done. She revealed the truth about Jessica, about Robert, about how Eleanor had stolen not just a business, but a bloodline. How the rightful heir Tyler had grown up in near poverty while his grandmother bought politicians. When Eleanor called Jasmine in desperation, her voice cracked with rage. "You destroyed everything," she screamed. Jasmine's reply was calm. "No, Eleanor. You did that when you chose power over people. I just brought the truth into the light." 2 years later, Jasmine sat on the porch of their lakeside home in Connecticut, watching Tyler play in the yard. Her MBA hung framed behind her. Tyler had just been accepted to the same academy his father once attended, on full scholarship. He was learning violin, just like Adam. And he was loved, safe, and proud of who he was. One day, he asked Jasmine, "Mom, can bad people become good?" She thought of Eleanor, sitting in a prison cell, stripped of her titles, her name now a cautionary tale. "I think," Jasmine said gently, "they can if they really want to." What Jasmine had done wasn't just a legal victory. It was the reclaiming of a stolen legacy. It was a reminder that wealth may build towers, but it can't silence truth. And when truth is armed with preparation, conviction, and love, it's unstoppable, because the greatest justice isn't destroying the past. It's building a future that no one can steal again. The woman everyone underestimated, until she reclaimed a legacy that was hers. All along, for years, people saw Jasmine Carter as nothing more than a waitress, a girl with tired eyes and a kind smile who worked double shifts at a downtown diner to support a child no one cared to ask about. But behind that apron, and behind those quiet steps, was a woman with a prosaic mission, and she was about to bring down a billionaire. The truth began unraveling the moment Eleanor Whitmore, CEO of the powerful Whitmore Global, spotted Jasmine at her son Adam's grave holding a child with the same piercing green eyes Eleanor had seen in the mirror all her life. That child was Tyler, Adam's son, her grandson. At first, Eleanor tried to control the situation like she controlled her boardroom by writing a letter.a.r. check. She offered Jasmine $200,000 in weekend visits, expecting obedience. But Jasmine tore the check in half and replied with words that shook the billionaire's composure. "You're not buying my son. You weren't there for Adam. I was." That moment was the beginning of Eleanor's unraveling. What she didn't know was that Jasmine wasn't just some poor, uneducated mother clinging to a child. She was a strategist, a storm in disguise. And for the past 3 years, Jasmine had been quietly preparing for a battle Eleanor didn't even know was coming. Because Adam hadn't just died in a car crash. He died while investigating his mother. And Jasmine had everything he left behind. Documents, recordings, proof that Eleanor Whitmore's empire had been built on decades of fraud, bribery, tax evasion, and betrayal. And at the heart of that betrayal was Jessica Blackwell, Tyler's mother, and the daughter of Robert Blackwell, Eleanor's cousin. Years ago, Eleanor had cut Robert out of the family company by manipulating legal documents and orchestrating a hostile takeover. Robert lost everything. His daughter Jessica grew up in Nanterre, poverty, never knowing her rightful legacy. Jessica and Adam met in college and fell in love. But Jessica feared Eleanor's wrath and never told Adam the truth until it was too late. She died giving birth to Tyler. Adam was devastated, but determined to make things right. That's when he turned to Jasmine, his best friend, and entrusted her with everything. His child, his evidence, his final promise. Jasmine didn't just raise Tyler. She trained. She studied law in the evenings. She built a coalition of allies. Professor Michael Chen from Columbia Law, renowned investigative, journalist Amanda Torres, and her own aunt, Helen Carter, a former federal attorney. And when Eleanor tried to take Tyler, Jasmine responded with power Eleanor couldn't buy. She filed a legal motion with Morrison, Calville, and Pierce, one of the top civil rights firms in the country, working pro bono. The lawsuit warned that any attempt to remove Tyler would constitute legal kidnapping under socioeconomic discrimination. It wasn't just bold. It was ironclad. Then came the media storm. On a Monday morning, headlines broke across the country. Whitmore Empire under investigation. Leaked records show bribery, money laundering, and fraud. FBI agents raided Whitmore Global. IRS froze Eleanor's accounts. The securities commission suspended trading of her company's stock. It all collapsed in a matter of hours. And at the center of it all stood Jasmine unshaken. Eleanor called her, desperate. You ruined me. Jasmine's reply was calm and final. No, Eleanor, you did that yourself. I just held up the mirror. 2 years later, Jasmine visited Eleanor in prison. The once feared CEO now worked laundry duty in a correctional facility, stripped of her power, her influence, and her illusions. I came to tell you, Jasmine said softly, placing a photo on the table. Tyler got into Phillips Academy, full scholarship. He's learning violin, like his father. Eleanor stared at the image of the boy she tried to steal with money. Why are you telling me this? Because you're still his grandmother. And he asked me something the other day. Can people who've done bad things become good? I told him. Only if they really want to. Jasmine stood to leave. The room was quiet. Her mission wasn't just about justice. It was about restoration. She had reclaimed the Blackwell legacy, not for revenge, but so that Tyler could grow up, knowing who he truly was and where he came from, not with bitterness, but with pride. The empire built on lies had fallen, and in its place, Jasmine had built something stronger, something no one could ever steal. Family. She didn't just protect her son. She exposed an empire of lies. By the time the story broke, Jasmine Carter was no longer just a single mother fighting for her son. She had become something far greater. The woman who dismantled one of the most powerful corporate empires in the country with nothing but patience, preparation, and the truth. 3 years earlier, she was a waitress scraping by, raising Tyler, a boy with Adam Whitmore's unmistakable green eyes. Eleanor Whitmore, Adam's mother and CEO of the billion-dollar Whitmore global empire, didn't know Jasmine existed. Not until she found her, at Adam's grave with Tyler crying beside her. What started as suspicion quickly became rage. When Jasmine revealed that Tyler was Adam's son, and that she had raised him alone since his death, Eleanor's instinct was control. She offered Jasmine $200,000 for custody of Tyler, promising private schools, wealth, and opportunity. Jasmine refused, tearing the check and standing her ground. You may have money, she said, but I have love. And Tyler? He knows what that looks like. It was then that Eleanor made her fatal mistake. She tried to take Tyler through legal force. But Jasmine wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a quiet warrior, prepared for war. Behind her soft voice was 3 years of meticulous planning. While juggling double shifts and bedtime stories, she had been gathering evidence, studying law, and building a team of allies who knew exactly how to bring down giants. Among them, Dr. Michael Chen, law professor at Columbia, who advised Jasmine on legal precedent. Amanda Torres, a fearless investigative journalist known for exposing corruption. Helen Carter, Jasmine's aunt and a retired corporate attorney, who had taught her that the sharpest weapon is knowledge. Together, they documented decades of illegal activity by Eleanor Whitmore and her company. Fraudulent contracts, offshore laundering, labor violations, tax fraud, and political bribery. And Jasmine didn't just collect evidence. She connected the dots, organized the proof, created a legal and media strategy so tight that not even Eleanor's millions could undo it. The final blow came on a Monday morning. Whitmore empire collapses amid corruption scandal. The headlines were everywhere. FBI raids, IRS investigations, Securities Commission, suspensions. Eleanor's accounts were frozen. Her board resigned in disgrace. Her lawyers quit. And still Jasmine wasn't finished. Because this wasn't just about Eleanor's crimes. It was about justice for Jessica Blackwell, Tyler's mother, and Adam's partner, who had died giving birth to him. Jessica was the daughter of Robert Blackwell, Eleanor's cousin and former business partner, whom Eleanor had betrayed decades earlier to steal the Whitmore fortune. Jessica had grown up in poverty, abandoned by the family that should have protected her. She fell in love with Adam in college, but feared revealing her identity, afraid Eleanor would destroy them both. She died without ever reclaiming her family's legacy. But Adam had learned the truth. Before his death, he had begun compiling evidence of Browners. Eleanor's betrayal documents Jasmine now held in her hands. And now, the world knew. Tyler was not just Eleanor's grandson. He was the rightful heir to the Blackwell legacy. Eleanor tried calling Jasmine one last time. "You've destroyed everything," she screamed. "No," Jasmine replied. "You destroyed it the day you chose power over love. I just revealed the truth." 2 years later, Eleanor was in prison. Her empire was gone. And Jasmine? She stood on the porch of their new lakeside home in Connecticut, watching Tyler run through the grass. Her MBA diploma hung proudly in the hallway. Tyler had been accepted into the prestigious academy where Adam once studied. He played the violin like his father, laughed like his mother, and lived without fear. One evening he asked, "Mom, do bad people ever become good?" Jasmine smiled gently. "Only if they really want to." That was her victory. Not the downfall of Eleanor, not the court rulings, not the front-page headlines. Her true triumph was building a life for Tyler, where truth replaced fear, love replaced legacy, and dignity replaced every dollar that tried to erase them. Because Jasmine didn't just win custody, she reclaimed history and made sure that the next generation would never have to fight the same battles again. The truth will set you free. How a waitress brought a billionaire to her knees. Eleanor Whitmore had spent her entire life believing there was nothing money and power couldn't fix. As CEO of Whitmore Global, she had destroyed competitors with the stroke of a pen and silenced anyone who dared to stand in her way. But she had never faced someone like Jasmine Carter. Jasmine wasn't a lawyer, a politician, or a corporate rival. She was a waitress, at least that's all Eleanor thought she was. But what Eleanor didn't know was that Jasmine had spent 3 long years preparing for the moment she would expose everything. It all began at a cemetery. Eleanor had gone to visit the grave of her only son, Adam, whose death in a car accident 3 years earlier had left a hole in her life she could never fill. That was when she saw Jasmine standing at the headstone with a little boy who had Adam's same green eyes. The boy's name was Tyler, Adam's son, Eleanor's grandson. The discovery ignited something cold and ruthless in Eleanor. She confronted Jasmine. Then, tried to solve the problem the way she always had, with a check. $200,000 for custody. Private schools. A life of luxury. Jasmine only had to sign the papers and walk away. But Jasmine tore the check in half. "You're not buying my son," she said softly but firmly. "I raised him when no one else would. I'm his mother. That's not for sale." Eleanor's mask of civility cracked. She threatened court action, leveraging her vast network of lawyers and political contacts. But she didn't realize Jasmine had already prepared for this day. Behind her quiet demeanor, Jasmine had been working tirelessly, fueled by a promise she made to Adam before he died. He had entrusted her with Tyler, and with the evidence he had collected proving that Eleanor's empire had been built on lies. For years, Eleanor had concealed a family betrayal. Decades earlier, she had forced her cousin, Robert Blackwell, out of the family company through forged documents and backroom deals. Robert's daughter, Jessica Blackwell, Tyler's mother, grew up in poverty as a result. Jessica and Adam fell in love in college, but Jessica feared Eleanor would destroy their future if she learned the truth. She died giving birth to Tyler, never able to reclaim her family's legacy. Adam had discovered everything and begun gathering proof. Fraudulent contracts, offshore accounts, and evidence of bribes to politicians. But he was killed in the car crash before he could act. Jasmine, however, inherited it all. And she had been building her case ever since. She wasn't alone. Jasmine had formed a network of allies. Dr. Michael Chen, a law professor at Columbia, who advised her on legal strategies. Amanda Torres, a nationally respected investigative journalist. Helen Carter, Jasmine's aunt and a retired corporate attorney who had taught her that knowledge was the sharpest weapon of all. Together, they assembled an airtight case. And when Eleanor tried to force Tyler away, Jasmine was ready. Her legal team, the renowned civil rights firm Morrison, Calville, and Pierce, filed a motion that any attempt to remove Tyler from his home would be considered discrimination based on socio-economic status. But that was only the beginning. On a Monday morning, Eleanor awoke to chaos. "Whitmore Global under federal investigation," the headlines read. FBI agents raided her corporate offices. The IRS froze her accounts. Securities regulators suspended trading of her company's stock. Leaked financial records showed decades of tax fraud, money laundering, and labor violations. Eleanor's empire crumbled in a single day. Desperate, she called Jasmine. "You've destroyed everything," Eleanor shouted. Jasmine's voice was calm. "No, Eleanor. You did that when you betrayed your own family. I just made sure the truth came out." 2 years later, Eleanor sat in a prison visitation room, wearing an orange jumpsuit. She was no longer the most powerful woman in the city. She was an inmate. Jasmine walked in, dressed professionally, carrying a folder. "I came to tell you," Jasmine said, placing photos on the table. "Tyler's been accepted to Phillips Academy. Full scholarship. He's learning violin, just like his father." Eleanor stared at the images of the boy she once tried to buy. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he's still your grandson," Jasmine said softly. "And he asked me if people who've done bad things can ever become good. I told him, only if they want to." Jasmine stood to leave. Her mission was never about revenge. It was about love, about restoring what Eleanor had stolen from Robert, Jessica, and Adam. It was about giving Tyler future built on dignity, not money. As Jasmine stepped out of the room, she knew she had fulfilled Adam's final request. The empire built on lies was gone, and in its place was something Eleanor could never buy: a family rooted in truth. In a prison uniform, she finally understood what power could never buy. 2 years had passed since the day Eleanor Whitmore was escorted out of her penthouse in handcuffs. Once one of the most feared and admired businesswomen in America, she now spent her days folding laundry in a prison facility in upstate New York, earning $2.50 an hour. hour and sleeping on a narrow cot. But nothing humbled her more than the day Jasmine Carter walked into that prison visitation. Room graceful, composed, and carrying news Eleanor never expected. "I came with an update," Jasmine said, setting a folder on the table between them. "Tyler's just been accepted into Phillips Academy. Full scholarship. The same school Adam attended." Eleanor blinked, stunned. For a moment, her mouth opened, but no words came. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the folder. Inside were photos of Tyler in a dark blue blazer, grinning with his violin in hand, standing proudly in front of the school gates. "He's playing the violin?" she asked, voice raspy. "Just like his father," Jasmine said softly. Eleanor's eyes welled with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years' regret. Deep, bitter regret. The kind that doesn't scream, it aches silently. She looked up. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," Jasmine said, pausing, "you're still his grandmother. And because last week Tyler asked me a question." Eleanor leaned forward, bracing herself. "He asked if bad people can ever become good." Jasmine's voice didn't accuse. It didn't scold. It just existed in truth. "And what did you tell him?" Eleanor whispered. "That it depends. That people can change if they truly want to. Not because they're forced, but because they're ready to face the truth about who they were and who they want to become." Silence wrapped around the table. For once, Eleanor didn't have a comeback. No cutting remark. No executive tone. She was no longer the woman who controlled boardrooms with a glance. She was just human, broken, and finally aware of how much she had lost. "I thought I was protecting him," she said quietly. "Tyler, I thought money could give him everything Adam never had." "You thought money could replace presence," Jasmine replied gently. "But Tyler needed love, stability, a mother who held him at night, not a legacy he didn't understand. And Adam, he didn't want wealth for his son. He wanted him to be seen." Eleanor looked away. "I never asked about Jessica. Never asked about the baby. I didn't care enough to look." "That was your biggest mistake," Jasmine said, assuming that silence meant unimportance. That if someone wasn't in your circle, they weren't worth your time. Eleanor's hands tightened around the photo. She remembered that version of herself. The woman who walked past janitors without a glance, who saw people like Jasmine as tools to be moved, not stories to be heard. And that arrogance had cost her everything. "My entire empire," she said almost to herself, "brought down by a woman I didn't think was worth knowing." "No," Jasmine corrected. "Brought down by the truth. I just delivered it." There was no triumph in her voice, no gloating, just quiet justice. Eleanor stared at the photo again. Tyler's eyes glowed with a brightness she'd never known in her own home. In that moment, she didn't see a pawn in a power struggle. She saw a boy with a future she no longer controlled, but could finally respect. "Do you think he'll ever want to see me?" Eleanor asked. Jasmine's expression softened. "Maybe. One day. If you show him that change isn't something you say, it's something you prove. Over time. With actions. With humility." As Jasmine stood to leave, she turned back one last time. "And for what it's worth, I think Adam would have been proud to see you sitting here. Not because you're punished, but because maybe, for the first time, you're listening." Eleanor stayed at the table long after Jasmine had gone. That night, in her cell, she pulled out a notebook and began to write about Jessica, about Adam, about every missed birthday, every ignored phone call, every time she chose power over people. She didn't know if Tyler would ever read it, but it was a start. The beginning of a redemption story that could never erase the past, but maybe, just maybe, could build a bridge to a better future. Because for the first time in her life, Eleanor Whitmore realized power can build empires, but only love can build a legacy. She thought she'd lost everything until her son's legacy brought her peace. That afternoon, Jasmine Carter sat on the porch of their peaceful lakeside home in Connecticut, watching Tyler laugh as he ran barefoot through the grass. A framed MBA diploma hung proudly behind her inside the house, a symbol of every sacrifice, every late night, every moment of doubt she had overcome. Her phone rang. It was Aunt Helen. "Honey, I saw the news. How do you feel?" Jasmine smiled, eyes never leaving Tyler. Like Adam can finally rest. Her voice trembled with both peace and pride. Tyler was safe, loved, thriving. Not because she fought with hate, but because she stood with purpose. He now knew the truth of his family, not the version written by power, but the one built through love and justice. And Victoria, once untouchable, now sat in a prison uniform, paying the price not for being wealthy, but for believing that wealth could replace love, truth, and accountability. Family cannot be bought. True legacy is not written in money, but in the love we leave behind. Jasmine showed us that justice is not about revenge. It's about protecting the next generation from repeating the mistakes of the last. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated or told you weren't enough because of your background? Share your story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it today. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to follow more powerful stories where truth wins and love builds what money never could.